Wonderful. Welcome everyone to this session starting today on February 6th, Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. This is session 28 of Advent and Divine Justice. We are here with Ehsan Bayat, who has created this materials through the Crimson Academy initiative, which we welcome all of you to please check that out on YouTube, the Crimson Academy. With that being said, we are on session 28 of Advent and Divine Justice, our study, and now we move forward. But before that, we want to have an opening prayer, and that will be for the teaching prayer for the southern states of the United States. Shaheen, welcome. If you wouldn't mind, would you be able to provide the opening prayer today?
Sure, Alapa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha.
Thank you so much. Now, dear Ehsan, we are ready to start this session number 28 on February 20. I was going to say February 26th. That's a Yamaha. February 6th, 2022. Speaking of which, we're looking forward to a Yamaha coming up.
Yes. Thank you very much, dear John. And thank you, Shaheen, for reciting that prayer. Excellent. Welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to be getting into our next part. I will share our screen so you can see what I am seeing. Here we go. Okay. Is this the right one? No, sorry. I have a few. Yeah, this one is the right one. Excellent. Here we go. And I will full screen it. There we go. Okay, so dear friends, let us move on. So in our last session, we were covering the paragraphs in regards to the double crusade. Okay, we were studying about the double crusade, and then the beloved guardian was talking about the trials, tests, and tribulations that the American Baha'i community would be facing. And now we're entering into a very interesting set of paragraphs, paragraphs 63 through 73. And in these set of paragraphs, this is a transitionary paragraph set. Okay, so all the way up to this part, the beloved guardian has really been hitting home his three weapons: rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudices. And now, after all of that, really stressing the importance of having these spiritual prerequisites entering into our inner life for the purpose of inner transformation and bringing about an external transformation in the whole life of the community, and then consequently causing a transformation in the greater society, now the beloved guardian is now transitioning in these set of paragraphs. So first, he will be doing a recap coming up in paragraph 63. So having a recap paragraph. Then now he is going to transition into the next set, talking about teaching, which is the primordial focus of the whole Advent of Divine Justice, right? Because if you remember, the Advent of Divine Justice was written in 1938. At that point, the first 7-year plan was launched, 1937. So the beloved guardian wrote this great text, 1938, so that the first 7-year plan would go on without a hitch. Now, So now he's focusing on the duty and significance of teaching, as well as the transforming power of Baha'u'llah. This is such an important subject, dear friends, that cannot be overstressed. The reliance on the power of Baha'u'llah, reliance on him. And then this God-born force that is brought about by every revelation, and especially but this most recent revelation brought about by these twin manifestations of God, this God-born force. So these are the paragraphs that understudy in this part, 63 through 73. As there are 10 paragraphs, and we have a few readers in-house in this Zoom, I have it already recorded, and I will just play it so everyone can hear it, okay? And then after that, as we get through the intense study, we can call on the readers, okay? So let us do that so everyone can hear the recording of these paragraphs being read, okay? Here we go.
Welcome, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's reading of the Advent of Divine Justice. In this section, we'll be reading paragraphs 63 through 73. Dearly beloved friends, I have attempted in the beginning of these pages to convey an idea of the glorious opportunities as well as the tremendous responsibilities which, as a result of the persecution of the far-flung faith of Baha'u'llah, now face the community of the American believers at so critical a stage in the formative period of their faith, and in so crucial an epoch in the world's history. I have dwelt sufficiently upon the character of the mission which in a not too distant future that community must, through the impelling force of circumstances, to arise and carry out. I have uttered the warning which I felt would be necessary to a clearer understanding and a better discharge of the tasks lying ahead of it. I have set forth and stressed as far as it was in my power those exalted and dynamic virtues, those lofty standards which, difficult as they are to attain, constitute nonetheless the essential requirements for the success of those tasks. A word, I believe, should now be said in connection with the material aspect of their immediate task, upon the termination of which, at its appointed time, must depend not only the unfoldment of the subsequent stages in the divine plan envisaged by Abdul-Baha, but also the acquisition of those capacities which will qualify them to discharge, in the fullness of time, the duties and responsibilities demanded by that greater mission which it is their privilege to perform. The 7-year plan, with its twofold aspects of temple ornamentation and extension of teaching activity, embracing both the Northern and Southern American continents, is now well advanced into its 2nd year and offers to anyone who has observed its progress in recent months signs that are extremely heartening and which augur well for the attainment of its objectives within the allotted time. The successive steps designed to facilitate and covering the entire field of the work to be achieved in connection with the exterior ornamentation of the temple have for the most part been taken. The final phase, which is to mark the triumphant conclusion of a 30-year-old enterprise, has at long last been entered. The initial contract, connected with the first and main story of that historic edifice, has been signed. The fund associated with the beloved name of the greatest holy leaf has been launched. The uninterrupted continuation to its very end of so laudable an enterprise is now assured. The poignant memories of one whose heart so greatly rejoiced at the rearing of the superstructure of this sacred house will so energize the final exertions required to complete it as to dissipate any doubt that may yet linger in any mind as to the capacity of its builders to worthily consummate their task. The teaching aspect of the plan must now be pondered. Its challenge must be met, and its requirements studied, weighed, and fulfilled. Superb and irresistible as is the beauty of the first Mashral Askar of the West, majestic as are its dimensions, unique as is its architecture, and priceless as are the ideals and the aspirations which it symbolizes, it should be regarded at the present time as no more than an instrument for a more effective propagation of the cause and a wider diffusion of its teachings. In this respect, it should be viewed in the same light as the administrative institutions of the faith, which are designed as vehicles for the proper dissemination of its ideals, its tenets, and its verities. It is, therefore, to the teaching requirements of the 7-year plan that the community of the American believers must henceforth direct their careful and sustained attention. The entire community must, as one man, arise to fulfill them, to teach the cause of God, to proclaim its truths, to defend its interests, to demonstrate by words as well as by deeds its indispensability, its potency and universality, should at no time be regarded as the exclusive concern or sole privilege of Baha'i administrative institutions, be they assemblies or committees. All must participate, however humble their origin, however limited their experience, however restricted their means, however deficient their education, however pressing their cares and preoccupations, however unfavorable the environment in which they live. God, Baha'u'llah himself, has unmistakably revealed, hath prescribed unto everyone the duty of teaching his cause. Say, he further has written, teach ye the cause of God, O people of Baha, for God hath prescribed unto everyone the duty of proclaiming his message, and regardeth it as the most meritorious of all deeds. A high and exalted position in the ranks of the community, conferring as it does on its holders certain privileges and prerogatives, no doubt invests him with a responsibility that he cannot honorably shirk in his duty to teach and promote the faith of God. It may at times, though not invariably, create greater opportunities and furnish better facilities to spread the knowledge of that faith and to win supporters to its institutions. It does not, however, under any circumstances, necessarily carry with it the power of exercising greater influence on the minds and hearts of those to whom that faith is presented. How often, and the early history of the faith in the land of its birth offers many a striking testimony, have the lowliest adherents of the faith, unschooled and utterly inexperienced, and with no standing whatever, and in some cases devoid of intelligence, been capable of winning victories for their cause, before which the most brilliant achievements of the learned, the wise, and the experienced have paled. Peter, Abdu'l-Baha has testified, according to the history of the church, was also incapable of keeping count of the days of the week. Whenever he decided to go fishing, he would tie up his weekly food into 7 parcels, and every day he would eat one of them. And when he had reached the 7th, he would know that the Sabbath had arrived, and thereupon would observe it. If the Son of Man was capable of infusing into apparently so crude and helpless an instrument such potency as to cause, in the words of Baha'u'llah, the mysteries of wisdom and of utterance to flow out of his mouth, and to exalt him above the rest of his disciples, and to render him fit to become his successor and the founder of his church, how much more can the Father, who is Baha'u'llah, empower the most puny and insignificant among the followers to achieve, for the execution of his purpose, such wonders as would dwarf the mightiest achievements of even the first apostle of Jesus Christ. The Bab, Abdul-Baha, moreover, has written, have said, should a tiny ant desire in this day to be possessed of such power as to be able to unravel the abstrusest and most bewildering passages of the Quran, its wish will no doubt be fulfilled, inasmuch as the mystery of eternal might vibrates within the innermost being of all created things. If so helpless a creature can be endowed with so subtle a capacity, how much more efficacious must be the power released through the liberal effusions of the grace of Baha'u'llah. The field is indeed so immense, the period so critical, the cause so great, the workers so few, the time so short, the privilege so priceless, that no follower of the faith of Baha'u'llah worthy to bear his name can afford a moment's hesitation. That God-born force, irresistible in its sweeping power, incalculable in its potency, unpredictable in its course, mysterious in its workings, and awe-inspiring in its manifestations. A force which, as the Bab has written, vibrates within the innermost being of all created things, and which, according to Baha'u'llah, has through its vibrating influence upset the equilibrium of the world and revolutionized its ordered life. Such a force, acting even as a two-edged sword, is under our very eyes, sundering on the one hand the age-old ties which for centuries have held together the fabric of civilized society, and is unloosing on the other the bonds that still fetter the infant, as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah. The undreamt of opportunities offered through the operation of this force, the American believers must now rise and fully and courageously exploit them. The holy realities of the concourse and high, writes Abdul-Baha, yearn in this day in the most exalted paradise to return unto this world, so that they may be aided to render some service to the threshold of the Abha beauty, and arise to demonstrate their servitude to his sacred threshold. A world dimmed by the steadily dying out light of religion, heaving with the explosive forces of a blind and triumphant nationalism, scorched with the fires of pitiless persecution, whether racial or religious, deluded by the false theories and doctrines that threaten to supplant the worship of God and the sanctification of his laws, enervated by a rampant and brutal materialism, disintegrating through the corrosive influence of moral and spiritual decadence, and enmeshed in the coils of economic anarchy and strife. Such is the spectacle presented to men's eyes as a result of the sweeping changes which this revolutionizing force, as yet in the initial stage of its operation, is now producing in the life of the entire planet. So sad and moving a spectacle, bewildering as it must be to every observer unaware of the purposes, the prophecies and promises of Baha'u'llah, far from casting dismay into the hearts of its followers or paralyzing their efforts, cannot but deepen their faith and excite their enthusiastic eagerness to arise and display in the vast field traced for them by the pen of Abdul-Baha their capacity to play their part in the work of universal redemption proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. Every instrument in the administrative machinery which, in the course of several years, they have so laboriously erected must be fully utilized and subordinated to the end for which it was created. The temple, that proud embodiment of so rare a spirit of self-sacrifice, must likewise be made to play its part and contribute its share to the teaching campaign designed to embrace the entire Western Hemisphere. the opportunities which the turmoil of the present age presents, with all the sorrows which it evokes, the fears which it excites, the disillusionment which it produces, the perplexities which it creates, the indignation which it arouses, the revolt which it provokes, the grievances it engenders, the spirit of restless search which it awakens, must, in like manner, be exploited for the purpose of spreading far and wide the knowledge of the redemptive power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, and for enlisting fresh recruits in the ever-swelling army of his followers. So precious an opportunity, so rare a conjunction of favorable circumstances may never again recur. Now is the time, the appointed time for the American believers, the vanguard of the hosts of the Most Great Name, to proclaim through the agencies and channels of a specially designed administrative order their capacity and readiness to rescue a fallen and sore-tried generation that has rebelled against its God and ignored his warnings, and to offer it that complete security which only the strongholds of their faith can provide.
Very good. There we go. Lot in those paragraphs, and quite a heavy read. Paragraph 63 through 73. Okay. So these are the paragraphs. As mentioned, paragraph 63. This is now the beloved guardian. Whenever he's now suddenly says, dearly beloved friends, you know, this is, he's now transitioning, or it's a new thought, or in that sense. And so now we're at paragraph 63. He says, dearly beloved friends, I have attempted in the beginning of these pages. Now we're at paragraph 63. Okay. Now let's see where paragraph 63 is in Advent. Paragraph 63, okay, starts on page 65, okay, of Advent of Divine Justice. So at the beginning of these pages, he means 64 pages of this letter already. So it's not a short amount of writing he's already done. Okay, so 64 roughly pages, the beginning of these pages, to convey the idea of the glorious opportunities as well as the tremendous responsibilities, which as a result of the persecution of this far-flung faith of Baha'u'llah now face the community of the American believers. Okay, so he's stressing the opportunities that the American Baha'i community have. Then, something very important, and why I'm re-stressing this. He says, I have dwelt sufficiently upon the character of the mission which in a not too distant future, that community must, through the impelling force of circumstances, arise and carry out. So he's placed the mission, the spiritual mission, upon the American Baha'i community. I've uttered the warning, which I felt would be necessary to a clearer and a better discharge of the tasks lying ahead of it. I've set forth and stressed, as far as it was in my power, those exalted and dynamic virtues. What virtues is he talking about? The rectitude of conduct, the chaste and holy life, and the freedom from racial prejudices. Now, this is very interesting. So what does he say about these lofty standards, which, difficult as they are to attain? So the beloved guardian is already saying, yeah, it's pretty hard to attain these qualities and attributes I'm talking about. But what does he say? They constitute, nonetheless, the essential requirements for the success of those tasks. So even though they're hard to achieve that standard that the beloved guardian is talking about, nonetheless, it's essential for the success of those tasks. Then the beloved guardian says, a word I believe should now be said in connection with the material aspect. So before, 64 pages or so pretty much was the spiritual aspect. What we need for the spiritual transformation of our inner life to bring about the transformation of not only our inner life, and hence through that, our communities and eventually the greater society. But now the beloved guardian is transitioning to the material aspect of the immediate task, meaning the teaching work, right? the practical. He's going into what is essential for the material and practical aspect of the teaching work. Must depend not only on the unfoldment of the subsequent stages in the divine plan envisaged by Abdul Baha, but also the acquisition of those capacities which will qualify them to discharge in the fullness of their time their duties, responsibilities demanded by that greater mission. Okay? So I'm not going to recap every single line, okay? That will be, it was 10 paragraphs, it would be quite wearisome, okay? But I'm going to now jump into some our study, because there's so many awesome points in these paragraphs that I want to really get into. Okay, dear Jeremiah, if you could read this slide for us.
The beloved guardian initially provides an outline of the letter so far and what he is going to address in the remainder. Shoghi Effendi then highlights the significance of teaching the cause and how it is a duty of every individual Baha'i. Finally, the beloved guardian describes the nature and impact of the force released through the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, a force that acts as a two-edged sword, on one hand, breaking apart the ties that have been holding together the fabric of human civilization, and on the other, unloosing the bonds that have been restraining the advancement of the faith of His Holiness Baha'u'llah.
Beautifully read. Thank you. So this, he recapped paragraph 63, then he started his discourse on the significance of teaching and the role of the individual. And then he wanted to stress this God-born force that emanates from the coming of these twin manifestations that has been released through these revelations. Okay, so we're going to get into now the major key points. So the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette is no more than an instrument for the more effective propagation of the cause, and should be viewed in the same light as the administrative order of the cause. Teaching the cause is an obligation of every Baha'i, and teaching the faith is sharing the heat generated by the fire of the love of God in us. I love this line. I put this one in here because it's so true. This is something that we should become an inferno, a blazing inferno of the love of God within us. And so even if someone is more than a mile away, they are feeling the heat coming forth from us. I'll give you a very small example. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a forest fire. I hope no one ever sees it personally. But I actually saw one when I was driving down from Dallas to Houston once. And I was with my wife, and we were driving from Dallas to Houston. And there was a forest fire on either side of the road. And it was so hot. And the friends in California know about forest fires. So as we were driving down, the intensity of the fire was so hot that I'm sitting in my car and I was like, oh my God. I literally had to take off my shirt while we were driving because I felt the intense heat, almost feeling like I was burning. So now I transition back to this example. Imagine that. Remember that quote from Baha'u'llah. He says, whenever you step into a city, the ground would proclaim and thank that you have entered into that city and rejoice. And so imagine that the city would proclaim and be joyful at the coming of you because you are a mouthpiece for the proclamation of his name. So that imagine that the heat and flame pouring from you is felt even at great distances, that it's almost tangible on that level. This is why the heat generated by the fire of the love of God. This is the amount of love that you should be pouring from your heart. The receipt of divine confirmation is dependent on active teaching of the cause. This is a very important, and I stress this because it's not only in Advent of Divine Justice, but it also comes again in the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and it comes again in many of the writings of the beloved guardian, that you cannot receive the outpourings of these divine confirmations if you do not teach. You have to teach. You get cut off. You could all be, you could be in a really bad situation or a crisis, and you turn and say, oh God, please help me, help me. Then God's like, what have you been doing for me? Have you been opening your mouth and teaching? And if the answer is no, then it's very simple. I loved thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. It's a contract. What are you doing for him that he may do something for you? You pat my back, I pat your back. It's pretty simple. It's not a hard concept. God loves us. He loves us. What are you doing for him? So the receipt of these divine confirmations, him pouring his divine grace upon you, his aid and assistance, is dependent upon you proclaiming his name, teaching the cause. As shown by the early history of the faith, this is another incredible proof, as they say, proof of the power, incredible power of this cause. And not when I say cause, I'm talking about the cause of faith, the cause of that most great spirit. Not just talking about the Baha'i faith, the cause of the most great spirit. The history of faith is that many unschooled and inexperienced believers, and it was mentioned, Peter, inexperienced, he couldn't even tell the days of the week. He had to, count them like that. They had very little knowledge. But what happened? It is their faith, their absolute faith they had. Unschooled and inexperienced believers have won great victories for the cause. There's a quote from Solis Abdu'l-Baha, says, talking about the faith, and as ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. As ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. This is the balance. This is the balance. This is the balance. As ye have faith. How much faith do you have? How much faith? Belief. The force released through the revelations of the Blessed Bab and His Holiness Baha'u'llah is creating unprecedented opportunities for the American Bahá'ís to arise and to exploit them for the advancement of the cause. And with the coming of any new revelation, this force is released to achieve the purpose of that revelation in the world of creation. And in the revelation of Baha'u'llah, this force has been producing sweeping changes in the world since its release. So there we are, dear friends. Those are just the major key points coming from all those incredible extracts from the Beloved Guardian, paragraph 63 through 73. So paragraph 63. So as you can see on the right, in case you missed it, let's recap. So this is a recap paragraph, right? In paragraph 63, the Beloved Guardian gives an outline of the advent of divine justice up to this point and briefly previews future tasks emphasized in the rest of this incredible letter. The Beloved Guardian has addressed the following issues. So here are the four major following issues that he addresses. The opportunities and responsibilities that the American Baha'i community emerged as a result of the persecution of the faith of Baha'u'llah. The characteristics of the mission that the American Baha'i community should embark on in the future. Also, a warning to ensure a better understanding of and to discharge the tasks associated with this mission, as well as the moral standards that are indispensable, vital, as well as absolutely critical for the success of those tasks. So these are the main issues that he brings back. He's recapping. So the American Baha'i community, when this letter was written in 1938, it brings back afresh to the right in front of the friends what he was addressing. That these are opportunities and responsibilities, a task that is their spiritual destiny. Then he's also addressing these qualities and attributes, indispensable, vital, also extremely hard to achieve, but nonetheless indispensable and vital and critical for the success of the tasks that lay before the American Baha'i community. This is an awesome quote from Abdul Baha. What does Abdul Baha says? The most vital duty in this day, most vital duty. So it's the most, per se, the most important duty, right? Abdul Baha, most important duty in this day is to purify your characters, correct your manners, and improve your conduct. Most vital, most vital. So then you could say, Ehsan, I thought teaching was the most important thing in this day, right? But how can you teach if you do not do this one? If you do not correct your character and purify and correct your manners and improve your conduct, how can you be worthy to open your mouth and teach, right? We talked about most meritorious of all deeds. It's the foundation of all Baha'i activity is teaching the cause. So obviously, the most prime important duty is teaching, but the most vital duty, and at the very heart and center of the faith, essential, is this correcting of our character, this transformation of the inner life, which the beloved guardian has already spent 65 pages out of this letter to focus on, is this transformation of the inner life, to purify our characters, correct our manners, and improve our conduct. Now, as we're transitioning, the beloved guardian wants to focus on the remainder of the Advent of Divine Justice. Okay? Now, something that in relatively recent Universal House of Language wordage is capacity building. This is a term the Universal House of Justice has been embracing in the last, per se, 25 years. But if someone asked me, Ehsan, if you really want to, in 2 words, describe the beloved guardian, and I would say the beloved guardian was a capacity builder. That's really what he did. He was the ultimate capacity builder. He built the capacities of every community, every individual, supported them, raised their capacities, encouraged it. He was the supreme encourager. Read his letters, how much love, how much encouragement, how much guidance he poured out to everyone and raised their capacities, raised these nascent institutions, and he was the supreme capacity builder. So this is, if someone asked me, said, Ehsan, describe the beloved guardian. That's in 2 words. That's how I would do it. So the remainder of the Advent of Divine Justice concentrates on now the material aspects of the community's immediate tasks. So he's getting practical and concrete, okay, in the latter pages of Advent of Divine Justice. So all the way up to paragraph 63, which is on page 65 of this Advent of Divine Justice. Now we have to go all the way to, there's 124 paragraphs in Advent of Divine Justice. It goes to page 137, 138 in this. So from page 65 in here, all the way to 138, now he's going to get practical, okay? Practical. Because what was the first 7-year plan about? If you recall, in part 1, where we're talking about the goals of the first 7-year plan, 1 was the establishment of a spiritual assembly in every single state and province in Canada. Okay, so not only every state in the United States, but also in the provinces of Canada, and then also an establishment of a spiritual assembly. And in the second part of the 7-year plan was having a spiritual assembly in the goal areas of South America, okay, as well as the ornamentation, external ornamentation of the Mashal Askar. So these were the 3 goals of the first 7-year plan. How can they achieve all of those goals of spiritual assemblies in every state and every province in Canada, and then also in every country in the Latin America? How can that be if they're not practically focusing on teaching? So this now, the beloved guardian now wants them to focus on this aspect of pioneering, how to do it. Okay, the material aspects. The completion of this task would not only unfold subsequent stages of the divine plan revealed by His Holiness Abdul Baha, but would provide opportunities for the American Baha'i to acquire those capacities that will enable them to discharge the mission they were destined to complete. In paragraph 64, the beloved guardian describes the progress made on one of the major goals of the first 7-year plan of the American Baha'i community, the completion of the exterior of the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette, Illinois. So now paragraph 65. Paragraph 65 is really the teaching paragraph in that sense. He's really wants to hit home the importance of teaching the cause. The beloved guardian addresses the second major objective of the first 7-year plan of the North American Baha'i community, namely the extension of the teaching activities both in the northern as well as the southern continents of America. In highlighting the significance of the expansion of the faith, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi notes that the temple, this is so important, the temple is no more than an instrument for the more effective propagation of the cause, and should be viewed in the same light as the administrative order of the cause. So even this incredible Mashal Askar sitting there, and how much not only beauty and everything, it's an institution in itself, but the beloved guardian here says it's no more than just an instrument for propagation of the cause, and should be viewed in the same light as the administrative order of the cause. Shows how important teaching is. Even the Mashal Askar sitting there is another title for this, how Mashal Askars are, the silent teachers, right? So this is, the American Baha'i believers should direct their careful and sustained attention to the teaching requirements. Whatever plan we're in, we're in the 9-year plan. Whatever plan we're in, we should pay attention to the teaching requirements. Every single one of us, if we ever carry the name, I am a Baha'i, we say I am a Baha'i, we should have a personal teaching plan. Regardless, even if your cluster doesn't have one or your local spiritual assembly doesn't have one, you are a Baha'i. You should have a personal teaching plan, right? Because teaching is a duty. You have accepted the word and teaching of Baha'u'llah, and in the Kitab Ahdas, it says right there very clearly that teaching is a sacred duty. And then someone asked me, Ehsan, come on, okay? You know, I understand teaching's a duty, but whenever we hear the word but, then you're coming, saying something, right? But, okay, I get it, but, I'm scared. I don't know enough. All these excuses, right? I don't know much. Is it okay if I, let, this person or that person teach, Or if I, for example, here, listen me out. It's like they're trying to, get out of the role and duty of teaching. I have to be the one to okay them. He was like, listen, is it okay if I say, introduce them to you, and then you do the teaching? I don't have to do the teaching, but I say, okay, how about you do it, but I do the introduction? I was like, no, that doesn't qualify as teaching the cause. Let's go to Gleanings, Kitab al-Das. The most vital duty in this day is not introducing someone else to do your work. That's kind of like, it's kind of trying to do a loophole on Baha'u'llah, It's like, that person's good at teaching, so let's introduce him to that. No, every one of us has to be a teacher of the cause. This is something that we're obligated to and work on, okay? Refine and work on it. This is what we've been instructed to. Interestingly, there's a tablet, and my dad came across it, and it's in Persian. This is an interesting thing. I'll share this also. This world that we live in is the world of Nasut, the physical dust, okay? My dad told me about this when I was much younger, and I have to ask him for reference. This is the world of Nasut, the world of dust, right? Our souls do not reside here. It resides in the spiritual realm, in the realm of Malakut, okay? Our souls are in a different plane, but they have an affinity to this, physical, creation right here, okay? Anyway, why I'm bringing this up is because our souls have this bounty, this gift. When we teach, our souls have this desire to spiritually progress, and this is one of the great gifts that Baha'u'llah has gifted us, is the gift of teaching. And so I'm going to move on. I'm going to come back to that analogy later. This importance of teaching for every individual is emphasized in paragraph 66. I encourage you to reread paragraph 66 because it's something, the wordage the beloved guardian used in there. The entire community must, as one man, arise to fulfill them. This is right there in paragraph 66. To teach the cause of God, to proclaim its truths, to defend its interests, to demonstrate by words as well as by deeds its indispensability, its potency, and universality should at no time be regarded as the exclusive concern or sole privilege of Baha'i administrative institutions, be they assemblies or committees. So it's not just the job of, the spiritual assembly or a committee. It's the universal. And how at the very opening was, we should move as a one man, right? This is the beloved guardian. He's citing statements from His Holiness Baha'u'llah to demonstrate that teaching the cause is an obligation prescribed to every single one of us. And we cannot shirk that responsibility or pass it off to another and just say, hey, I can't do it. I'm not good at doing it. I don't have the ability to do it. I don't know enough to do it. I'm scared to do it. I'm not good at voice. There was a great Baha'i in the time of Abdul Baha. Many of you may know this story. And I met the great grandson of this individual when I was serving at Bosch. So I'll share this quick story. So it was very interesting. When I was serving at Bosch, his great grandson told me the story of his great grandfather. And he said that my great grandfather was part of the entourage of Abdul Baha when they went up the mountain of Carmel, and they met in the mausoleum of the shrine of the Bab, right? And so they would go there, and Abdul Baha, with his beautiful flowing abba and his turban, and He was there, and Abdul-Baha, center of the covenant, Sirullah, the mystery of God, he would sit there with his flowing Abba and sit, and he would open feast at that time, because feast was Abdul-Baha. So Abdul-Baha, he would open the feast with his beautiful chanting. And when Abdul-Baha chanted, the whole mountain would hear his beautiful voice. And so those in attendance were just over the moon. And he would share this story of when Abdul-Baha chanted, it would reverberate through your very being. You would feel it. It wasn't just like, just in one ear, out the other ear. He said it would penetrate you and every molecule would vibrate. So when Abdul-Baha was chanting, he was so just over the moon. Then it was time for devotions, and he would turn to the gentleman on the right and he would say, please, just say a prayer. And then he would close his eyes, fold his arms, very reverent. And then he would say a prayer. And then after him, then another friend would, recite one prayer from Abdul-Baha. And all of these friends had memorized tablets, right? This tablet or that tablet. And Abdul-Baha had given them tablets to memorize. That's how it was back in the day. So then it was time for this gentleman to recite a tablet that Abdul-Baha had given him to recite. This individual said, oh, baby, I'm sorry, Abdul-Baha, but my voice, no good. I'm sorry. Right? So Abdul-Baha, this is the sign of God on earth. There's some people you can, I'm not too sure about. This is the sign of God on earth, right? Abdul-Baha turned to him, please say the prayer, right? Then the second time he says, oh, I'm sorry, my throat, no good. I'm not good at, I'm not good. Then on the third time, this individual, the great-grandson of this gentleman, he said that his great-grandfather said that suddenly he saw the flaming power of the sign of God on earth. And, and suddenly he saw, as they say, the burning bush itself, and he said that suddenly I was awestruck. But the first words that came out of my mouth were, I kind of pointed to my throat and acting like I couldn't do it. And then Abdul-Baha, in a type of laugh, said, drink some chai and have some nabat. This is the rock candy sugar. And drink some of this chai. And so he gave it to this wonderful servant of Abdul-Baha, this lovely soul, gave it to him. And then he said, and then it was with all the sternness and power and love emanating from Abdul-Baha. Then he got real close to him and said, when Abdul-Baha says chant, you chant. So he so he drank the chai and chopped on the sugar real quickly and very, tremulously, as they said. And he slurped the chai down. And when he opened his mouth, it was as if a nightingale emerged from his voice. And interestingly, not only his voice was beautiful, his children's voice, his grandchildren's voice, his great-grandchildren. And I met his great-grandchild at Bosch, and it was incredible voice. And it was blessed by that occurrence. But what I was not trying to impress is that we have an obligation in this day to teach. We should not be hindered by anything, our voice or whatever. Open it. This is the most vital duty in this day. Do not come up with excuses to set back this obligation. Imagine this. Imagine this. Imagine that, God forbid, tomorrow you are suddenly in an accident, could be, and you are suddenly transported to the next realm because of that accident, whether it was a car accident or some other crisis. And suddenly you're whisked up into the next realm. And there is your Lord, and he is the judgment. It's time for judgment. And he is now saying, okay, let's now look at your per se, your life real quickly. You had this opportunity to open your mouth and teach the cause at this point, and he's got the whole life, right? And there's no way you can, question any of these, episodes, because he got it all on file, as they say. And he said, you had the opportunity to open your mouth and proclaim. In fact, I set up those opportunities so perfectly, and all you had to do was just open your mouth and share the cause. Why didn't you? And then if you rebut it back saying, I was scared, I didn't know enough, this or that, then he says, I have given you so many cases and examples of the friends that were completely uneducated, lacking experience, unqualified. In fact, you are much more educated and more qualified than any of those people of the past. Why didn't you open your mouth? You had the greatest jewel. Whether you were born into this faith and gifted this great jewel, why didn't you open your mouth? And then what will you say to him? That is something that you will be like, oh my God, right? And that's when you will suddenly realize what it means to really beg for forgiveness and fall on your face. You know what's interesting? If you look at your prayer book, there are more prayers for forgiveness than any other prayers. And it makes you think, yeah, we're screwing up a lot. We're making a whole lot of mistakes, right? And the reality is, we got to ask for forgiveness a lot, because we are often failing in our duties. And the reality is, that's why it's called a straight and narrow, the straight and narrow, because often we're off on other courses and we have to stay on that road and keep our mind focused. Anyway, that was a long segue, but I wanted you to, remember that this is our obligation. The most important obligation is teaching. In fact, I gave a whole talk on this subject, and this is one of my favorite quotes, and this is coming from is a compilation on teaching, and the opening of this compilation, the Universal House of Justice, this is from the Supreme Body. This is what the Supreme Body writes. The Universal House of Justice in this writes, the cornerstone of the foundation of all Baha'i activity is teaching the cause. As Abdu'l-Baha has categorically proclaimed in his will and testament, the guidance of the nations and peoples of the world is the most important of all things, and of all the gifts of God is the greatest is the gift of teaching. So let's go back to that. The cornerstone of the foundation of all Baha'i activity. So if there's the foundation of all Baha'i activity, right? And right now you could say, what is the Baha'i activity? The Baha'i activity are currently what's going on, right? We got devotionals, we got the classes of the Institute, the study circles, we got firesides, we got deepenings, we got all of these junior youth groups, children's classes. But what is the cornerstone holding all of this together, right? The pivot, per se, the cornerstone holding everything together. It's teaching the cause. And if we don't do that, everything else becomes, it's all going to fall apart in that reality. Because this is the axis, the cornerstone of the foundation of all Baha'i activity, teaching the cause. It's so pivotal, so important. And it is also the greatest of all the gifts that Baha'u'llah has bestowed upon his servants. This is from Abdu'l-Baha, and this shows how important it is. Teach the cause, teach, convey the message, awaken the souls. Now is the time of laying the foundation. Now we must gather brick, stone, wood, iron, and other building materials. This is not the time of decoration. We must strive day and night and think and work. What can I say that may become effective? What can I do that may bring results? What can I write that may bring forth fruits? Nothing else will be useful today. The interests of such a glorious cause will not advance without undivided attention. While we are carrying this load, we cannot carry any other load. Teach, teach, teach. I also love this slide because I think it was in paragraph, let me see, it was that paragraph 60. Yeah. It said, if an ant. That one beautiful. I love the Guardian. This is the quote from the Blessed Bob. Okay, let me pull it up. If an ant in this day, it was from the Blessed Bob. Paragraph 69. Here it goes. The Bab Abdul Baha moreover has written, it's from the Blessed Bab. Should a tiny ant desire in this day to be possessed of such power as to be able to unravel the abstrusest and most bewildering passages of the Quran, its wish will no doubt be fulfilled. What would an ant ask to unlock the mysteries of the Quran? But that's just, I love the humor here. But even if an ant wants to unlock the mysteries of the Quran, it will happen. But then even what happens? If so helpless a creature can be endowed with so subtle a capacity, how much more efficacious must be the power released through the liberal effusions of the grace of Baha'u'llah. So if an ant, a tiny little creature, wants to unlock the mysteries of the Quran, the power will make it so. Then he says, how much more power if you want to unlock it will be bestowed upon you. Teaching the faith is sharing the heat generated in us by the fire of the love of God. In his tablet, His Holiness Baha'u'llah exhorts his followers, O friends, you must be all so ablaze in this day with the fire of the love of God, that the heat thereof may be manifest in all your veins, your limbs and members of your body, and the peoples of the world may be ignited by this heat and turn to the horizon of the beloved. You must be so ablaze in this day with the fire of the love of God. I think for it was over 20 years, I was teaching children's class here in Houston. And the thing that, I learned after the first few years was 1 hour a week was not sufficient to teach much, okay? You really can't teach that much of anything. Especially to younger populations who have shorter attention spans. So one of the things that I discovered was, if you were a parent or if you're someone that is teaching children or even a teacher of the cause teaching, the thing that is so most vital to transfer is the love. This is what needs to be transferred. Not if you're trying to teach the history of Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim and then going to the history of the cause of God. No matter how important all of the history and teachings and principles, whether you're studying on the sacred text, if you're studying on the tablets of Baha'u'llah, or most important is the love. The love has to be here. And if the love is seated here, it will radiate to your audience and they will feel it. They will want to be in your company. They will seek you out because they will be like, wow, that person has love. That person has, and I want to have that love in my heart too. How can I have more of that? And that love comes from drinking this ocean of Baha'u'llah, drinking it, just soaking it up, lapping it up. If you recall from our last session, we're literally should be laughing up this revelation of Baha'u'llah, drinking it as if we are a parched traveler. We should be like that one in the seven valleys. First, we should be on this search. And the search should be tiresome because we should be searching. And once we found our love, and that love is the ocean, we should be drinking at this threshold of Baha'u'llah, drinking it as much so that it fills us, every part of our body. This is, my dear friends, what we should be doing. And when it permeates every part of us and we feel refreshed, we cannot but help be a new creation, because we cannot help but smile and laugh randomly with jubilation, because it has penetrated us and we are of a different creation. We have something now to share. The world is thirsty. They're walking without focus. They're blindly. But we are filled with the waters of life. Why don't we share this waters of life with them? Why do we hoard it to ourselves and then have meetings and celebrate these waters and share prayers and everything and say, here, I have this beautiful water. Would you like to offer a water, say some more water? Yes, I love this water. Here, I'm going to read this water. And we keep passing this water around to ourselves, but we don't share that water of life to others. The reality is, we're going to come up to a very powerful quote from the beloved guardian, and it says, the crisis is in the world, the torments and the problems that are faced by the greater humanity are exacerbated by the Baha'is themselves not playing their part. If we don't play our part in presenting the solution and helping humanity, we have the solution. We have the remedy to the problems of the world, the vaccination. We have the remedy, but we're hoarding it to ourselves. We're not giving it out. We should be giving it out freely. Happy is the man who will arise to serve my cause and glorify my beauteous name. Happy. And again from Baha'u'llah. Arise, O people. This is one of the biggest common themes throughout all the teachings. In fact, I think there are more compilations on teaching the cause than any other subject. In fact, I personally have done 3 or 4 of them myself on teaching the cause. And I even done one on just the subject of arise. Nothing else. Just if you can do a whole compilation on just this one word, arise. And the compilation I put on online is called Arise in His Name. Arise, O people, and by the power of God's might, resolve to gain the victory over your own selves. If you look at just the word arise, it means that you were slumbering. You were just inactive. And so Baha'u'llah is saying, arise, get up. And if you recall from our last session, who is Baha'u'llah in the sense of that militant language that we were talked about? He would be the commander-in-chief. He is calling upon his soldiers, arise, the time has come to enter into the battle. Get up, arise. How cool is that? Now he's calling upon his army. Get up, the time has come. And his general Abdul Baha is saying, arise, let us go, amass the forces. And if you open your mouth, the whole concourse on high will come to your aid. Arise. His Holiness Abdul Baha warns. This is probably one of the scariest slides I have, but this is something so pivotally important. His Holiness Abdul Baha warns that the receipt of divine confirmation is dependent on active teaching of the cause. Active teaching of the cause. The receipt of divine confirmation. So you will receive divine confirmations dependent on active teaching. This is from Abdul Baha. It is known and clear that today the unseen divine assistance encompasseth those who deliver the message. And if the work of delivering the message be neglected, the assistance shall be entirely cut off. For it is impossible that the friends of God could receive assistance unless they be engaged in delivering the message. If you want assistance from him, teach. Open your mouth. Proclaim his name. And this is why I have this slide. You know, the rains of divine confirmation are pouring on every side. And if you neglect, it is as if you're putting that umbrella up and you are cut off, entirely cut off. So that makes you think, hey, how can I get access to that divine confirmations, right? Here's a simple example in nowadays. Imagine if Baha'u'llah has wanted you always to win the lottery. He's always wanted you to win the lottery. The lottery is, always available. And he's like, oh, Scott, I really want you to win the Powerball, multi-Powerball, but you have not been buying the lotto, right? So you have been cutting yourself off from all of that greatness. This is a weird example, but I just wanted you to understand that you have been cutting yourself off from the accessibility of that divine gift that he wanted you to have, okay? That divine gift, the confirmations that he was going to bestow upon you, you were cutting yourself off. We have to undertake to follow his prescription. It's a very simple prescription. It's not, granted, there's some parts of it that are harder than others. The character part, the standard, and keeping ourselves always focused on it. Yeah, at times we fall. And that's why there's a lot of prayers for forgiveness, right? But there's that character. We got to keep our mind on the game. As well as every day, try to teach. And first and foremost, teach ourselves. Got to try to teach. Try to present the faith to someone in any way. This is how you work to have that accessibility to the divine confirmations and not be cut off, right? It's by working on that. The true basis of unity is service, and he hopes all the members will arise with renewed effort to teach the faith. This is from the Beloved Guardian. This is something, if you recall in that paragraph, I think it was 65. 65. 66, sorry. This is paragraph 66, where the Beloved Guardian is saying, the entire community must, as one man, arise to fulfill them. The unity of the whole community must arise together. Paragraph 66. From Abdul Baha, know ye the value of this time. Do you know the value of every moment that you're awake? Know ye the value of this time. Strive ye with all your hearts, raise up your voices and shout until this dark world be filled with light, and this narrow place of shadows be widened out, and this dust heap of a fleeting moment be changed into a mirror for the eternal gardens of heaven, and this glove of earth receive its portion of celestial grace. Then will aggression crumple away, and all that maketh for disunity be destroyed, and the structure of oneness be raised. Here, Abdul-Baha is saying and stressing the importance of teaching, but stressing also at the attitude towards teaching, that we should have such a liveliness towards it, and excitement and jubilation, as well as and lack of to be timid, but also have that level of courage. Raise up your voices, shout. Reminds me of the beloved guardian when he was very young, and he would chant the prayers so loudly. And this is something that we should be just so infused with the prayers and the words of Baha'u'llah, that anyone that crosses our path, have you heard of this? Have you heard of Baha'u'llah? Have you heard of this great faith? Have you heard? And just, it should be so here that you just want to, anyone that crosses your path, and try to bring it together. And this is the art of teaching. Remember, there's no prescription on it. There's no, this is how you do it. The art of teaching is how to bring the faith to that heart. This is from His Holiness Abdul-Baha. And I'm going to let my dear friend Scott read this one. Go for it.
His Holiness Abdul-Baha emphasizes the connection between teaching and divine confirmations. The teaching work should, under all conditions, be actively pursued by the believers, because divine confirmations are dependent upon it. Should a Baha'i refrain from being fully, vigorously, and wholeheartedly involved in the teaching work, he will undoubtedly be deprived of the blessings of the Abha kingdom. Even so, this activity should be tempered with wisdom, not that wisdom which requireth one to be silent and forgetful of such an obligation, but rather that which requireth one to display divine tolerance, love, kindness, patience, a goodly character, and holy deeds. In brief, encourage the friends individually to teach the cause of God and draw their attention to this meaning of wisdom mentioned in the writings, which is itself the essence of teaching the faith. But all this to be done with the greatest tolerance, so that heavenly assistance and divine confirmation may aid the friends.
Excellent. And on the right, what does it say?
Say, to assist me is to teach my cause. This is a theme with which whole tablets are laden. This is the changeless command of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future.
Thank you, dear Scott. So there we are. Again, this is from selections from the writings of Abdul-Baha. The teaching work should under all conditions be actively pursued by the believers, because these divine confirmations are dependent upon it. And if should a Baha'i refrain from it, what happens? Refrain from being fully, vigorously, and wholeheartedly involved. So those are the three requirements also. It's not like, I'm teaching, but I'm not fully involved. My whole heart's I'm not totally in it, but you got to be wholehearted, vigorous, and fully and wholeheartedly involved in the teaching work. But if you refrain from it, you will be undoubtedly deprived of the blessings of the Abha kingdom. And that, my dear friends, is why often we see things not happening the way we like to, because we're not receiving the confirmations. It's upon us. Remember, this is a two-way street. It's a two-way street. We've talked about this. That this is a contract that we have with Baha'u'llah. If you say, I am a Baha'i, there's things that you got to do. You got to magnify his name. If you want those confirmations that are pouring from Baha'u'llah, you got to open your mouth. This is the reality. In this day, we've seen how even the lowliest of low individuals become, as His Holiness Abdul described, Peter being of the first apostle, being the greatest. It's not based upon your qualities of knowledge or innate abilities. It's about obedience. In paragraph 67, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi explains that if a member of the community reaches a high rank, then that brings with it the responsibility to teach and propagate the faith. Such a high rank may, on some occasions, provide better means and opportunities to spread knowledge of the faith and attract others to its institutions. However, a higher rank does not always exert a greater influence on the hearts and minds of the people who are attracted to the faith. The early history of the faith contains many stories of unschooled and inexperienced believers who have won great victories for the cause. Example, high rank. Many people have professions of high rank. Some people laud anyone named having the appellation of doctor. So if someone is named doctor this or doctor that, they consider them high rank. So if you have ranks or titles after your name or before your name, these are opportunities to spread the knowledge of the faith to those circles, those echelons and groups. But the beloved guardian says, however, this higher rank does not always exert a greater influence on the hearts and minds of people who are attracted to faith. It's the early history of the faith contains many stories of the unschooled and inexperienced believers. Then the next paragraph, 68, the beloved guardian gives an example of Peter. The beloved guardian gives this example of Peter, the unlettered disciple of Christ, who under the transforming spirit and power of His Holiness Jesus Christ became the foremost disciple of His Holiness Jesus Christ, his successor and the founder of the church. Shoghi Effendi then exclaims that if that was the power of the Son, then how much more His Holiness Baha'u'llah, the Father, can empower his insignificant followers to execute his purpose. And there are a number of stories, and I'm going to share just, I think, one wonderful story from this Mirza Abu Fazel. So there are a number of stories about how Mirza Abu Fazel al-Parghani, his life was from 1844 to 1914. He came across the Baha'i faith through his encounter with unlettered Baha'is. Abu Fazel became the foremost Baha'i scholar who played a major role in spreading the faith in Egypt as well as in the United States. He was one of the individuals, as you recall, that Abdul Baha sent to bring unity to the Baha'i community in the early days. And so he was an incredible individual, one of the foremost scholars ever. He was one of the few apostles of Baha'u'llah who never met him. At the beginning of 1876, during Mirza Abul Fazel Qulparani's time in Tehran, Abul Fazel met an uneducated cloth seller named Agha Abdul Karim and had discussions with him about religious issues. As Abul Fazel got to know Agha Abdul Karim over time, he was impressed by the qualities and insight of this unassuming man. Abul Fazel eventually learned that Abdul Karim was a Baha'i and that his views primarily reflected the Baha'i teachings. This made Abul Fazel curious about the faith. So this is how he got to be introduced to the faith. In another story, Mirza Abul Fazel meets a Baha'i blacksmith. This was before Abul Fazel had recognized Baha'u'llah. It so happened that on the way out, one of the donkeys lost a shoe. So the party called at the nearest blacksmith for help. Noticing the long beard and large turban of Mirza Abul Fazel, indications of his vast knowledge, the blacksmith, Ustad Hossein Naal Band, this means shoesmith, who was illiterate, was tempted to enter into conversation with the learned man. He said to Mirza that since he had honored him with his presence, it would be a great privilege for him if he could be allowed to ask a question which had perplexed his mind for some time. When permission was granted, he said, "Is it true that in the traditions of Shia Islam stated that each drop of rain is accompanied by an angel from heaven, and that this angel brings down the rain to the ground?" "This is true," Mirza Abul Fazel responded. After a pause, the blacksmith begged to be allowed to ask another question, to which Mirza gave his assent. "Is it true," the blacksmith asked, "that if there is a dog in a house, no angel will ever visit that house?" Before thinking of the connection between the two questions, Mirza Abul Fazel responded in the affirmative. "In that case," commented the blacksmith, "no rain should ever fall in a house where a dog is kept." Mirza Abul Fazel, the noted learned man of Islam, was now confounded by an illiterate blacksmith. His rage knew no bounds, and his companions noticed that he was filled with shame. They whispered to him, "This blacksmith is a Baha'i." So this is before he had recognized the faith and recognized Baha'u'llah. So it was this unlearned blacksmith that unlocked this writings and from Shia Islam. And here it is. This is from this. I went to read my Quran notes and I pulled it here. So it says here, a companion of Allah's messengers and one of those who fought at Badr together with Allah's messenger told me that Allah's messenger said, "Angels do not enter a house in which there is a dog and a picture." So angels do not enter a house where there is a dog. And so that is from the hadith. In paragraph 70, the beloved guardian explains the nature and impact of this God-born force released through the revelations of the Blessed Bab and His Holiness Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi describes the characteristics of the force as irresistible in its sweeping power, incalculable in its potency, unpredictable in its course, mysterious in its course, and awe-inspiring in its manifestation. This is such a cool concept of this force being released by the manifestations of God on when they appear, and this power that is infused into the world and sweeping the planet and transforming and changing events so that these events will bring about the eventual golden age of the cause of Baha'u'llah. And this sword that we're going to be talking about here, this force acts as a two-edged sword. This is from the writings. It says this force acts as a two-edged sword. On one hand, the force is breaking apart the ties that have been holding the fabric of human civilization together. And on the other, it loosens the bonds that have been restraining the advancement of this faith of Baha'u'llah. And through these twin processes, the force is creating unprecedented opportunities for the American Bahá'ís to arise and to exploit them for the advancement of this cause. So a two-edged sword, right? This is the two-edged sword. And where did we hear this two-edged sword first time? Comes from the book of Hebrews, right? You got to be a biblical scholar sometimes, right? To unlock and understand all of these terminologies of the beloved guardian. So that the word of God is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. So the word of God is sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrows. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. This is from the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verse 12. So this two-edged sword, it is this twin processes that are at work, simultaneous processes. On one hand, it's loosening the bonds that have been restraining the advancement of the faith of Baha'u'llah. Anything that is limiting or restraining the advancement of the faith of Baha'u'llah, it's making the opportunities for the faith of Baha'u'llah to massively advance. And then on the other hand, what is it doing? It is breaking apart the ties that have been holding the fabric of human civilization together. That is so profound. I don't even know what half of these things mean, truly. What does it mean? Breaking apart the ties that have been holding the fabric of human civilization together. Remember, this is a new world order brought about by Baha'u'llah. Our understanding and conceptions of even civilization and how things are being done, all the models of even our economies and how things are done are based upon either our limited minds and not on the principles of the manifestations, on how, for example, justice, right? Justice is a principle that is divine. So we are basing justice on what humanity thinks justice is. And we can very clearly see that this prison system is an injustice. It's very often injustice. So that's why this is the breaking apart the ties that have been holding the fabric of human civilization together. Things are being broken apart. There's chaos in many parts of the world. There's wars that are ready to break apart. Dear Scott has a hand. Go for it.
I just think of, we don't think of it maybe now, and maybe children that are born now don't, but there was a British Empire that, and many European countries had colonies in other areas, and especially the British Empire had so many colonies, and that empire held together some of these countries or regions together under a bond of this empire. And a lot of it we're now seeing was used to for the home country, if you would, the English to take the many of the natural resources and the human resources out of these countries and these areas, and kind of support the whole the home country, if you will. But nonetheless, those things are breaking apart, and luckily in some cases it hasn't necessarily been through a lot of violence, but some of it has been violence, and that's just one part. Like you're saying, that the justice system. It's just interesting watching some of these things fall apart in the newspaper, and they are breaking apart.
Great comment, dear Scott. I mean, if you scroll back, few hundred years. What is a few hundred years in the whole scope of, the lifespan of what has been going on in this world? What has happened of how these great empires have collapsed? I mean, as you mentioned, the British Empire, the sun never would set on the British Empire. I mean, they had all the way from China, Australia, to Africa, to United States. I mean, they had the whole world. And Great Britain is a tiny island relatively to their empire. And they had all the resources and lands and peoples and across there. Then the other empires, from the French Empire, the Russians, all these empires. Who would have thunk, as they say, who would have thunk that these empires would have collapsed and all their empires would have come to naught? And now a lot of these countries are under democracies or even constitutional monarchies, or their peoples are. Who would have thunk that now Germany, who was a very, at times, militaristic government, and is now a democracy? It's incredible. I mean, this is the breaking apart of ties that are holding the fabric of these human civilizations together. Things are changing and bringing about the maturation of humanity. And whether we are aware of it or not, this is the power of this day. This is the God-born force that is part and parcel of the injection of a manifestation of God into this world. Things are shaken up. We don't realize it. And things are being shaken to the very core. This is from Abdul Baha. This is about this revolutionizing force. There are a number of references in the writings of Baha'u'llah, as well as His Holiness Abdul Baha, to the nature and impact of this force mentioned by Shoghi Effendi in the paragraph. His Holiness Abdul Baha explains that this force released with the coming of any new revelation. The force operates within the world of creation to realize the purpose of that revelation. Abdul Baha states, when a great force is liberated by the entrance of a divine being into the world arena, it must of necessity express itself through the vehicle of a human temple. And the objective expression of this force manifests itself in thoughts of different grades and degrees according to the capacity of the people. So when this great force, that most great spirit, that great force is now entered into this world, into this world, it has to have a temple, a vehicle. And that vehicle was His Holiness Baha'u'llah in this day and age. And this force manifests itself in thoughts of different grades and degrees according to the capacity of the people. And if we recall, and which I also encourage every one of you to read Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. If you recall from your study of Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, the beloved guardian in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah talks about a prophecy coming from Zoroaster, the Zoroastrian prophecy. And he says, in this day and age, with the coming of Baha'u'llah, the sun is at its zenith. So the sun is at the highest point. So the full scope and powers of and plenitude of the powers have been released through this revelation of Baha'u'llah. So this is, and that is in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And encourage you all to also read that letter written by the beloved guardian. This is from Baha'u'llah. He says, I know not, O my God, what the fire is which thou didst kindle in thy land. Earth can never cloud its splendor, nor water quench its flame. All the peoples of the world are powerless to resist its force. Great is the blessedness of him that have drawn nigh unto it and heard its roaring. Reminds me of, when Baha'u'llah says, and he compares his teachers of his cause. He calls them the lions. And the force that is released by the voice is the roar of a lion, the roar, rah, right? And that force is when Baha'u'llah has opened his mouth in the proclamation, it is the supreme lion. He is the great lion. And when he proclaimed his proclamation to the kings and rulers of the world, it is as if the most great lion is roaring and calling out to the whole world, I am that I am. And we are supposed to be lions proclaiming his message. Are we roaring? Are we roaring? Or are we kind of like little timid pussycats, and we have to be patted on the back, good job, or are we, courageous lions in the field? That's something to think about. Because the force of our roar is this force, this God-born force, that it should infuse into our hearts and be proclaimed out. His Holiness Baha'u'llah, in one of his prayers, states that this revolutionizing force, released in every revelation, is embedded in the Word of God and has such a power that it transforms the realities of the entire world of being. I testify that no sooner had the first word proceeded through the potency of thy will and purpose out of his mouth, and the first call gone forth from his lips, then the whole creation was revolutionized, and all that are in the heavens and all that are on earth were stirred to the depths. Through that word, the realities of all created things were shaken, were divided, separated, scattered, combined, and reunited, disclosing in both the contingent world and the heavenly kingdom entities of a new creation, and revealing in the unseen realms the signs and tokens of thy unity and oneness. It is this power, this revolutionizing power, that this force that has come from with Baha'u'llah, the power, this creative power of the Word of God. It is the transformative power that takes a murderer, that is a mass murderer example. Let's go extreme. Someone is a mass murderer, extreme mass murderer, right? And then the Word of God penetrates his heart, and he says, oh, I'm so good with the knife. Let me become a surgeon and help save lives. I used to be able to kill lives. Now let me save lives. It is the transformative power, the creative power that it affected his heart and transformed him. Please, Scott, please.
I use that a lot of times when talking to friends about, there was a person named Saul, and history knows him as Paul, but he himself would say that he was not, in so many words, that he was ashamed of what his former life before he has his meeting with Jesus out in the desert or with other individuals. So it happens. We just take that. Sometimes we just think of Paul and take it for granted that he was always that way. And the same thing happens there were many individuals who wanted to do hurt, maybe talked about the believer, the Muslim that wanted to hurt Baha'u'llah, and when he was in Akka. And exactly. A couple times he came to the prison and wanted to meet Baha'u'llah and was going to kill him. And he said, come back. I'm not going to see you until you clear your heart and change your heart, or put away that weapon. And the man didn't know how in the world Baha'u'llah knew that was happening. And he becomes a believer.
Yep. No, absolutely. The transformation of the inner life, the transformation of the heart. This is what it's about. It's the power of the Word of God. You're absolutely right. The example of this transformation of Saul to Paul. And it's not just, the changing of one letter in their name. It's so massive that change. And another example is the story of this individual that when His Holiness Abdul Baha would traverse the streets of Akka, and there was an individual, and this is when Abdul Baha, this is almost 19 years when Abdul Baha was going back and forth in the streets there. This individual was so, his joy and happiness was to throw his rubbish and his excrement and on top of Abdul Baha as he would walk by. And this was, and Abdul Baha would go out of his way to not only give him money, and also he would, whenever he was sick, he would go and take care of him, and he would go and pray with his family. And this went on for more than 19 years. Okay, this was not just like a short period of time. And after all those years, eventually, this individual, that power, the transformative power, through the word of God being infused in reality, in the sense of not just being, the spoken word was being walked, as they say. Every one of us should walk the word, meaning we should be the exponent of the word of God. Abdul Baha was the exponent of the word of God in reality. He was walking as an exponent of the word of God. And he was so touched by the word of God and seeing it lived, breathed, that it touched his heart, and he changed, and he immediately prostrated himself after that period of 19 years of heaping, cruelties on Abdul Baha and hurting him, and begged for forgiveness. And so this is something that, this is the power of the word of God, and it should penetrate our hearts. And so much so that this transformative power of the word of God changes us from, as dear Scott said, from Scott to change our reality from Saul to Paul. So we should be a new creation. And as you know, in paragraph 28, which is in paragraph 28 of Advent, at the very end of it, of paragraph 28, it says a sharp distinction between that community and that people must be made, talking about the people of United States of America, talking about the Baha'i community, paragraph 28. If we wish to give due recognition to this transmuting power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, remember, this transmuting power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, this is what it's about, this power to change in its impact on the lives and standards of those who have chosen to enlist under his banner. Otherwise, the supreme and distinguishing function of his revelation, which is none other. So what is his most supreme and distinguishing function of the revelation of Baha'u'llah? What is the purpose of it? Which is none other than the calling into being of a new race of men, will remain wholly unrecognized and completely obscured. Ending paragraph 28, Adventine Divine Justice. So the whole purpose underlined, the supreme and distinguishing function of the cause of Baha'u'llah is to bring about a new race of men, brought about by this transformation of the inner life of the Baha'i community, which will hence bring about the transformation in the greater Baha'i community and then into external conditions. Abdul Baha, there is a power in this cause, a mysterious power, far, far, far away from the ken of men and angels. It is our role as a Baha'i to tap into that power And how did we say we need to tap into it? Through teaching the cause, right? Because if we read those paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, what happens if we do not teach the cause? We get cut off from this power. So we got to teach to be able to gain access. That's our key card, as they say. That's our magnetic key card to be able to access this great power that's being given. The beloved guardian, in one of his messages, cites an utterance by His Holiness Baha'u'llah on the forces latent in his revelation. Through the movement of our pen of glory, we have, at the bidding of the omnipotent ordainer, breathed a new life into every human frame, and instilled into every word a fresh potency. All created things proclaim the evidences of this worldwide regeneration. And this is, he adds, the most great, the most joyful tidings imparted by the pen of this wronged one to mankind. I share this. This is funny. I was in our class on Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. It was last Wednesday, this past Wednesday. We were reading this exact same quote, and because this is from Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, comes from World Order Baha'u'llah. We were reading this exact quote. And as I was reading it, this funny insight came to me, and I share it with you. So I was picturing His Holiness Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah had it rough for most of his life, right? At the beginning of his life, he was the son of a vizier. And he was born into great wealth and everything. And then, after the declaration of the Bab, very shortly after that, 1852 comes. There was an attempt on the life of the Shah. He was thrown into the Siachal, the prison, 1852, and it was miserable. 3 floors underground dungeon, up to his neck in a pestilential dungeon in Tehran, where all the sewage and vermin accumulate in that area. This is just one of his great tortures that he had to undergo, with a huge weight around his neck that ate into his flesh. Right? Then in the heart of the winter, he was forced to leave. He was expelled from Tehran. He had to go on foot to Baghdad through the heart of the winter. Comes to Baghdad. Eventually, he was also expelled from Baghdad. Had to go to Constantinople. From Constantinople to Adrianople, eventually to Akka. And every one of these places was incredible, suffering, all of it. But throughout his whole journey, why I'm bringing all of this up, throughout his whole journey, he had the opportunity to pen incredible tablets, incredible writings, and his faith was continuing to flourish. And then I was like, Ehsan, they made Baha'u'llah suffer so much, right? All they had to do was take his pen and ink away. That would have really hurt the cause. But apparently, they didn't take his pen and ink away. If they took his pen and his little ink bottle away, that would have really hurt the cause. He wouldn't have had all those incredible tablets and everything. That would have really hurt the cause. And then my father, my dear dad, he said, Ehsan, there is a tablet of Baha'u'llah, and it's also an epistle to the son of the wolf. He says, we have made you, I'm terrible at paraphrasing. He says, we will make you victorious not by your sword, but by your pen. So it says, so this is from Baha'u'llah says, we will make you victorious not by the sword, but by your pen. So it's inevitable that Baha'u'llah will be victorious over all because of his pen. But I was like, really? All they had to do was just like, hey, no. Baha'u'llah can't have access to this, beautiful, calligraphy pen and take away his ink bottle, and then that would have cut him off. He wouldn't be able to reveal all those awesome tablets. So, but that would have been very interesting if that had happened. But this is a facsimile right here of an original writing of Baha'u'llah, and along with his pen and his pen case. So this is you can see he had access to all these materials, and this is truly because Baha'u'llah is Baha'u'llah. Who could deny Baha'u'llah having access to a pen and paper? I mean, this is Baha'u'llah. So they were readily assenting to give him anything he would want. And here's some reed pens used by one of the secretaries of Baha'u'llah. You can see this is what they used. And you could see the revelation writing, it's all over. There was all over the place. And according to the Blessed Bab, as asserted by the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi in paragraph 70, this force vibrates within the innermost being of all created things. His Holiness Baha'u'llah has stated that the equilibrium of the world is upset and its order life is revolutionized by the vibrating influence of this force. And this is from Baha'u'llah: the world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. I mean, it's incredible the changes that have undergone, even just in this country, the United States of America, the things that have happened. If you scroll back even 100 years in what has happened in this country, from civil rights for African Americans to rights for women, to rights for work, to health rights, to food and safety rights, to you name it, to rights for protection of the environment. I mean, all of these are parts of this new world order, and you can find them all in the Baha'i World Commonwealth. I mean, every one of these is parts of how this new world order should come about. And United States, His Holiness Abdul Baha says, well, this will be the seat of the administrative order in the sense of the covenant. And that's why it's going to be tested supremely. And so we're going to be, so we're seeing, I guess, that's why the United States has to be the spear. And we're going to be at the spearhead of all these changes and chances of what is happening. It's very interesting. And so we can see all of these changes happening here in the United States. And all brought about by this revolutionizing force. So you can even scroll back to, not much was happening even pre-1844. It was still a period of civil war, pre-Civil War. And then right after it, you can see the whole country changing. This is from the World Order of Baha'u'llah. Oh, and we're getting close to closing. So let me end on this slide. The beloved guardian in the World Order of Baha'u'llah describes the impact of the force in creating and developing the Baha'i institutions. The onrushing forces so miraculously released through the agency of two independent and swiftly successive manifestations are now under our very eyes, and through the care of the chosen stewards of our far-flung faith being gradually mustered and disciplined. They are slowly crystallizing into institutions that will come to be regarded as the hallmark and glory of the age we are called upon to establish, and by our deeds immortalize. This is so important. It's by our actions. This is by our deeds immortalize. What are you doing? What are you doing for the cause? I always remember Kennedy's great statement, President Kennedy, what he said. He says, it's not what the country does for you, it's what you do for the country, kind of thing, right? And the same thing. It's not what the faith does for you. What are you doing for the faith? What are you doing in service? This faith is giving you everything. This faith is everything. It's giving you everything. But what are you doing in service? How are you giving back? You've been given this great precious jewel. What are you giving to contribute it back? So we'll pick up next time, because we have a few more slides left in this part, but the hour is a few minutes over, so we'll pick up next time. Any questions, dear friends? Any thoughts, insights before we close it off for today? But this was a very interesting session talking about this God-born force that is, penetrating the whole of our creation, brought about by the coming of these manifestations of God. And so this is something that we need to tap into. Oh, yes. Jeremiah, I love your comment. He mentioned, I love learning about the ant. Yes, that's so true. The ant that's why I included it, because that was from Abdul. He says, even if the tiniest of puniest of ants wanted to learn all the mysteries of the Quran and everything, he will have full access. Tiny ant, and then it makes you think, oh my gosh, I'm much bigger and greater than a tiny ant. But have I asked for anything? I mean, the access of all of these things? And then that's what he says. If you, want to access the mysteries, how much more will Baha'u'llah give it to you? So that's something that is upon you, my dear friends. Are you actually willingly and wantingly to access this ocean? That's upon you, my dear friends. And anyway, Jeremiah, we're closing it off for today. Did we have any questions, or we're ready to have our closing prayer? Excellent. As always, total pleasure and wonderful to be in your company. Thank you so much.
O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the host of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest.
Thank you very much, every one of you, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.